Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today, especially in these unprecedented times where we're sitting at home. Over the years, I've presented and attended many conferences, but this is my first sitting in my home office, staring at a webcam. So special thanks for joining today. Today, we're going to talk about collaboration in studio. My name is Sundar Raman. I'm a principal product manager on the studio team. On Roblox, I go by Reigning Swordfire. I have over 17 years of technical and product experience, and I joined Roblox late last year, so a little over 6 months at Roblox now. Before joining Roblox, I spent most of my career working at Microsoft, building various products from Visual Studio to Azure DevOps to multiple products within the Office suite like OneNote and Outlook. When I'm not working, I used to be able to kick back and play my Xbox, and I get to do that still, but now the games have changed a little bit. Now I'm enjoying Roblox and Minecraft with my two little boys. And thanks to this virtual world we live in, I guess thanks to Zoom as well, I enjoy training my martial arts, even though I haven't left my home in 4.5 months. Before we get started, we had a quick poll for you. I have 3 quick questions that I would love to get your answers on. Kara, can we start the poll? I can see the results coming in. %77 voted, 81%. Perfect, thank you. So from here, I'll just quickly read out. So most of you, 80% of you are working on teams of 2 or more people, which is great to hear. Almost 80% are using Team Create, and about 34% using collaborative editing. That's excellent. All right, I think this will be pretty informative then. So what are we going to talk about today? I want to cover 4 key things. First, our vision for collaboration in studio. If you folks were in Rob Melly's session earlier this morning, I'm going to try and beat his record by saying vision more times than Rob said. I'm just kidding. Second, I want to cover the principles we use for calibration and show you a couple of demos. First part is around where we are today with a couple of key updates that we've shipped in the recent past, and also show you what's cooking on the pot that we still haven't released. And looking ahead, I want to show you what's in store for the rest of the year and what comes beyond that. All right, let's get started. So first up, mission, vision, and principles. Our mission is to empower teams of all sizes, small, medium, large teams, with intuitive and powerful collaboration tools so that you can create the engaging experiences we want you to build. We believe that engaging experiences will take a team of people coming together to build, and your poll results clearly indicate that you're working in teams, so that's great. So here's a vision where we go. We want you to be able to work on from any connected device. All your data is in the cloud, data is persisted and is reliable, and you have device independence. You can work on your desktop PC and then pick up working on your game on your laptop. We want that to be seamless experience. We want you to be able to edit your game in an always up-to-date mode. Internally, we refer to this as synchronous collaboration. So you can see everyone's changes at all times. Or you might be at a scale where that is too disruptive and you might want to edit and then commit after, which we call as asynchronous collaboration. We want this to work for all types of content, code and 3D. We already have parts of this in areas. For example, in the 3D view, you already have real-time presence and collaboration. And for coding, we already have asynchronous, but by turning on collaborative editing, you can edit and commit when you're ready. We want to enable that for all kinds of content. We want the solution obviously to scale for teams of all sizes, as I mentioned earlier. So small, medium, large, we want to build the right set of tools so that it scales with as your needs grow. And then we want you to be able to choose whether you're working in, which mode you work in. We want you to be able to effectively work with all your collaborators. What that means is collaboration is built in, you get granular access to permissions, and then now that we have the foundation, we can build on that and provide capabilities that you need. For example, you might want to have review workflows. If you institute code review as a best practice on your group, then we want to provide those kinds of capabilities and integrate chat and voice so that you can effectively communicate with your collaborators. You can view the entire history of a game. Today, you can do this for places. You can look at the place version history. We want to take that to all kinds of content that's in the game. So being able to look at the history for code and instances as well. And for the content, we want, when you look at the history, we want you to be able to get the context. So if you commit a piece of code, you can leave comments so that you can actually understand the context of what changes you made. Being able to view the history, compare two different versions, and roll back if necessary. And last but not least, you can view changes made by others anywhere in the game in real time. Yes, I do have a mock on the right side showing you real-time presence inside the code editor. We want to make that happen. We want to provide real-time awareness of your collaborators and changes happening in your game. Again, we want to do that for all kinds of content, code and 3D. As I mentioned, the 3D view already has the real-time presence. You can see the presence in the Explorer when somebody is working on there as well. Now we want to bring that to the code as well and give you the option to choose depending on what your team's needs are. So what are the principles we use for calibration? We want to build a safe and reliable system. All your data is preserved. Completely acknowledge that for some of you, when you hit certain scale, team create, you have some hiccups, and that's exactly what we want to fix so that we have a solid foundation for moving all development to the cloud. Collaboration that scales to the needs of your team, regardless of the size. And the key point here is without adding the complexity. So before we move on to the demos, I want to touch on this key question: why build our own collaboration platform? So there are three key aspects to it that I wanted to cover in a little bit of detail. From the very beginning, Roblox platform has been about building an integrated development environment. And we want to extend that to collaboration as well, as more and more of you are working in teams. We want to build an end-to-end integrated development environment, provide a user experience that scales well without adding the complexity. Think zero setup. You install Studio, you enable team create, you add your collaborators and go. Or we might even cut down one of the steps. You install Studio and you directly can add collaborators. We have a wide spectrum of our developer base, starting from beginners who are learning to code on using our tools for the first time, to small and highly collaborative teams, to large teams that are building things at scale. We want to be able to satisfy the needs of the entire spectrum. We want to build this solution that works for everything in the game, code and assets, 3D models, images, meshes, everything in the game. We can interpret the data. Instead of treating assets as binary blobs, we can do more with it. We know the data in the game. We know the assets in the game. Over time, we can add tooling. I'll give you an example. Being able to look up the version history for an instance, being able to diff the properties of two versions of any of the assets, or being able to compare side by side and see how that particular asset evolved. We can build the tools around that. We want to build a solution that scales and has real-time awareness and collaboration by being 100% in the cloud. I touched on this earlier. We want to be able to build tools that satisfy the needs of your team, giving you real-time awareness, even enable real-time editing so that you have pair programming scenarios on one side, or as your team scales, you might have a need for having multiple sandboxes, by which I mean being able to take the place or a part of the place and work on that separately without disrupting the others and come back together when you're ready, and having real-time awareness while you're doing this. So that's where we're going long-term. And that's the main reason why we're building on our own collaboration platform. So where are we today? Let's take a look at a couple of demos. So first, I want to set some context and give you a quick introduction to Team Create and collaborative editing. Looking at the poll results, only 30% are using collaborative editing. So this will be a good intro for the rest of you, and see if I can convince you to try it out. So when you're in Team Create, when you go to edit the script, have you ever run into this dialogue that says someone else is currently modifying the script? This is where the script is locked so that we can avoid conflicts. That's the default. So in this case, I'm going to go back, switch my profiles, go into my home tab, game settings, options, and turn on collaborative editing. What this is going to do is remove the notion of a lock, and the changes that I make will be local so that I can continue to work, I can play test my game, and when I'm ready, I can commit the change. And while I'm doing all this, my other team members can also do the same. So I'm going to go back and open the game. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to leave a simple comment in there to make a change. And you can see the drafts widget show up on the right-hand side. I can select that script and commit. Odds are you're working on more than one script at a time. So I'm going to do the same thing here where I edit 2 scripts. On the drafts widget, I can multi-select and commit. So that is collaborative editing. Let's take a couple of quick detailed look at what's happening under the hood. So once Team Create is enabled, when you open up the game on one of the studio clients, it's going to spin up a server on the back end, and all the other clients connect to it for collaboration. So actions like enable collaborative editing will require your other collaborators to disconnect so that we can spin up a new server and with the updated settings. That's why in the demo, if you noticed, when I enabled collaborative editing, I switched out, I disconnected from the game from both the clients and then came back in so that the new server can be spun up. Team Create automatically saves the place to the cloud every 5 minutes. When collaborative editing is turned off, the client takes a lock. And as I mentioned, this is to avoid conflicts. That's why in the earlier in the demo, you saw the dialogue telling me that someone else has a lock on the script. Now, enabling collaborative editing makes it a draft. And as you saw in the second part of the demo, it keeps the changes locally. So there is no locking. You can work on your own pace. Anyone can edit the script at any time. If someone does check in a change that you don't have, we'll give you a quick indication that there is a new version on the server. You can diff and merge to resolve conflicts and then commit when you're ready. Script changes, by the way, are saved to disk with every keystroke. So we don't want to lose any of that data. Talking about diffing and merging, I wanted to give you a quick update on this update we released just in the last week. In fact, I posted this on announcements just yesterday. We have an updated merge from server experience. When you have collaborative editing, in the drafts widget, you can see that little icon before the script name, which shows you that there is a new version on the server. You were able to already right-click and say merge from server. Now we've expanded that to be able to handle multiple scripts at the same time. Today, you have to do it one by one, so we just recently updated this. So we have this new dialog, which can handle multiple script merge. And just like before, when you select the script and you're going through conflicts, for each conflict, you can keep your draft version or the version on the server that your team member checked in, or you can pick other and do it manually. So now this handles multiple scripts. You can resolve conflicts, and we have the status indicator showing you that the conflicts are resolved. Once everything is green, you click on the merge all, and then go ahead and commit like you normally would. Next up, let's take a look at place version history. So now I can right click on my place and view history. Again, this is a recent update we published a couple of weeks ago. Now I have the entire history of the place directly in Studio. We brought this functionality from the website. We have the version number, the committed timestamp, and whether the version is published or not. So I can select any version and click open, and this is going to launch a Studio instance with that version. This has been a request from the community in the past, where you don't have to go to the website to revert to open a particular version. Now you can do that directly from Studio. You can pick any version. Let's say in this case, I'm looking at this version because I accidentally deleted that Jeep. So I can go back. I'm going to close out this session. So I'm here in my older version with the Jeep. I can go ahead and save and go through my regular overwrite workflow. So I got to pick the game, the place, and then overwrite. So just to double check, I'm going to go into version history. Here, we are restarting the place because now it's the latest version. My Jeep's intact there. Perfect. Now I'm going to open up places and look at the history. And as you would expect, there is a version 24, which is current, that I just reverted to. I can go ahead and publish. And now when I look at the history, as you would expect, the published status indicates that it's been published. By the way, in this demo, I'm just showing you the two-step process, but in case you were reverting because you wanted to go back to the last playable version, you can just open up that version and publish directly. So let's take a couple quick look at what's happening under the hood. So as I mentioned, you can open any version of the place from history. You no longer have to revert from the website and then revert again. If all you were trying to do was copy something from a previous version of the place, now you can open any version of the place, which is, I think, going to be pretty useful for you. Overriding the place, similar to collaborative editing that I mentioned earlier, needs to spin up this new server. That's why we are restarting there. So when you are overriding or reverting back to an older version and you're in team create, you'd want to have your collaborators disconnect. So you override and then they reconnect so we can give the updated place to them as well. Place version history on the website will be deprecated at some point. It's not done yet. It'll be done at some point. And you might be wondering, hey, where is my revert action? And that's exactly what we're working on right now. We want to enhance this with the revert action, a simple action that you can go back to, and add additional capability that I'll touch on in a couple slides from now. Okay, so that was what we've recently shipped. So let's take a look at some of the things that we're still working on that are not quite ready for release, but will be coming later this year. First up is script comment workflow. So I'm in my collaborative editing session. I make a change. And then as before, your script ends up as a draft. Now, when I go in and select that script and I'm ready to commit, when I click commit, I get this new commit dialog. I can leave a comment to describe what I changed in this particular version. So this is very useful for posterity when you're going back and looking at the history. So this particular comment will be associated with the version of the script. You can see the draft widget now shows the committing status and it gets committed. Now, as I mentioned earlier, your odds are you're working on multiple scripts at the same time. And it's a very similar experience whether you're working on one or more scripts when you commit. So I'm going to make a change to 2 different scripts here. And then both of them end up as drafts just like before. I can select multiple scripts. When I hit commit, I get the same dialog. And in this case, the comment that I leave is going to be associated with the version history for both of those scripts. So that script comment workflow, that is still something that we're working on. So a couple of details under the hood. The commit dialog, as I mentioned, that has the comment is optional. You can choose to ignore it and just click commit, in which case we'll add an automated generated comment. This is shown only when collaborative editing is turned on. So just want to make that clear. And script commit, as I mentioned, it creates a version of the script and it'll version the place as well. So now we have the history. So we're going to enhance that place version dialog that I showed earlier. And we can list out the scripts that cause the place version to be created. And that's something we're working on right now. Next up, let's take a look at script version history. This one I'm really excited about. We've been hard at work for several months at this problem. So similar to the place version history, now I can right click on a script and view script history. And this is going to show me the entire history of that script. And it has all the metadata that you would expect: the version number, the committed timestamp, who made the commit, and the comment that was left. And if you had a batch commit, you can click on that little show link there that'll pull up the batch and the place version as well. So in this case, I'm going to just click on the version 2. When I click on the show, it shows me that I committed all those 4 scripts along with that batch. So if I pick any particular version, I have this handy shortcut to compare with the previous version. This is showing me a diff between version 7 and 8. When I go back in, okay, now let's say I want to revert back to an older version because I messed something up. So I'm going to pick the version 4. I can open up the entire batch or the particular script. So I'm going to open that script. So it opens in this read-only mode. You can see that it's version 4. I have this little informational bar with an action I can click, and it'll make it a draft. And you have the usual draft action. So I can compare with the server, see what changed. I can see the mass was updated. Great. I want to go back to this version. So I click commit, and it pops up the commit dialog as I showed before. So this is how you would revert using the version history. Now, once that change has been committed, I can go into the version history of the script. And sure enough, there is version 9 with my comment that I'm reverting back to v4. So you have the entire history of that script. So let's take a look at a couple of the details. So as I mentioned, in the demo, I only showed comparing with the previous version, which I think of more of a shortcut. It's handy. But you can compare any 2 versions. So I could have picked 21 and 18, and the button will say compare these 2 versions. And then you click that and it'll show you a diff between those 2 versions. So you can compare any 2 versions, which I think will come in quite useful. Script version history is for everyone. The demo I showed you only with collaborative editing turned on, but it'll be supported when collaborative editing is turned off and team create is turned off as well. Well, how will that work? When collaborative editing is turned off, we're not popping the commit dialog, but we create the script revision when you click on apply edits. So no change in workflow, but we'll create a revision. And when team create is turned off, the script revision is created when you save to Roblox. Okay, so that was both a look at what was recently shipped to production and things that we're working on. So looking ahead, where are we going with the rest of the year? So all the demos that I just showed you, the script version history, the commit workflow, and the update to the place version that I mentioned with the revert action or being able to see the scripts that cause the place to be revisioned, all these will come later this year. I mentioned earlier that we want to get to getting your data in the cloud. So we took a stab at this earlier this year by having new games in the cloud as a beta feature. We got some really good feedback. We're iterating on that. We'll have that available later this year. And I mentioned the scenario where you're working on your desktop PC and you want to pick up on your laptop. We want to enable that by taking the draft, which is currently local, to the cloud so that you can work on multiple machines seamlessly. And looking beyond, oh, by the way, our platform roadmap is on developer.roblox.com. Look up the Roblox platform roadmap. We will keep it up to date if any changes come up. Looking beyond 2020, where do we go? As I mentioned, we have a solid foundation at this point, so we can enable additional scenarios. First up will be the code review workflow for scripts. I took a survey earlier this year and talked to a bunch of you, and this is something we want to fulfill. If you want to institute a code review practice and you want to send code review to your team members and they can approve, we want to enable that. And the other scenario that I heard from some of you was also you might have a contractor or somebody temporarily working on your game and you want to go check, review what the work they have done. So we want to enable all of those scenarios. Now, I mentioned earlier, we have the data about the assets, so we want to be able to give you instance version history, just like how I showed you with the scripts and the places. You'll be able to right-click on an instance and look at the history and roll back if necessary. And then we can enhance it with additional tooling, being able to diff to versions of the instance, either a property diff or a hierarchy diff, maybe even do a 3D side-by-side comparison. Beyond that, we want to enable real-time awareness in the script. The mockup that I showed you earlier, we want to make that a reality. As I mentioned, as your team scales, you might have a need for working groups to work on a part of the game or the game in its entirety, but work in a sandbox so they're not disrupting the others. We want to enable that by being able to edit the place in a sandbox. And the key thing there becomes the merge. How do you come back together? So we want to enable that. And last but not least, I think with every post that I make on the announcements, even with the updated merge from server post that I made, there is always request for real-time script collaboration. Yes, it is on our product roadmap. We want to enable that as well. So in summary, here's what we covered today. I want to give you an understanding of how we think about collaboration in Studio, our vision, and why we building our own collaboration platform, and our principles, and show you a demo of what's available that was recently available, shipped, and what's cooking, and that'll be available later this year. Sneak peek at our product backlog, rest of the year roadmap, plus what's coming up after that. With that, that's a wrap. Thank you. Kara?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation, Sundar. The future of collaboration sounds awesome. Now it's time for Q&A. We've got a bunch of questions and we have a good amount of time to go through them. So let's get into it. Our first one is from Nova Coepta. They want to know, why can't we see meshes right away?
Meshes right away in which part of the product would that be? Is that the Game Explorer or the Asset Manager?
For the meshes needed for Team Create.
Got it. Okay. That is something we're working on right now, improving the performance of how the meshes show up.
Awesome. Next up is from Below Natural. Are there any plans for a Google Doc-like collaborative editing?
As I mentioned there, that is a scenario on our roadmap. The real-time script collaboration that I mentioned think of that as a Google Doc-like collaboration. Exactly how it'll shape up is unclear at this point. We do want to solve that scenario, whether it's a Visual Studio Code-like collaborative session, or is it real-time collaboration across the team? That's something we have to go solve, but it is on our roadmap to get to.
Gotcha. Hold on, Nova Coepta might have a follow-up. If you can type that up and then either night or breakfast, paste it up here, we'll move on to the next question and then we'll come back. Louis K22 wants to know, are there any plans to move more configuration options from web or online to the data model to more easily allow for deploying changes from dev to production?
We are definitely looking at what kind of settings to allow directly from the studio. Yes, that's something we're looking at.
All right, so a follow-up with Nova Klepta. So they're asking specifically about the moderation workflow for meshes within Team Create, not about the performance.
Ah, got it. So I'll have to take a note. If you can drop a question on Discord, I'll get back to you on that.
All right, you got that, guys? Cool. Next one is from Mullets Gavin. How am I supposed to use two studios, test and main, so I do not have to worry about testing? For example, bringing scripts over by simply importing or something rather than forcing me to manually copy and paste all updated code over.
Yes, that is something that we are actively working through. We have plans in place. It's about execution. So we'll have something to share hopefully in the next couple of months.
Cool. Next question is from Below Natural. In the future, with all group members with Team Create, In the future, will all group members with Team Create access be able to view newly created meshes, images, and assets?
I will go ahead and say yes.
Short answer, yes. This one was a pretty popular comment, so let's see, there might be a follow-up. The next one is from FPTBB. Do you plan to allow a specific user to see only specific parts and modify them, like just modifying what is visible to the client?
That is an interesting one. It did come up in a couple of conversations that I had with some of you recently. It is something that we're looking at. I mentioned in the session the granular permissions. That is part of that. Like we want to think through how permissioning model works. And if that is a need, right? Again, it may not be a need for smaller groups, but as you scale up, you might have those scenarios where you bring in a contractor. That's one case that I heard. You bring in a contractor and you want to give them access only to a certain part, either to protect your IP or just to keep your game in a safe place. So we want to consider those. Yeah, those are definitely on the docket to look at.
Great. Following question is from Mullets Gavin. Are there any plans to update the draft widget?
Are you looking at any specific updates that you need?
So they clarify with, I used it with someone who has worked in the games industry for years on my accelerator prototype, and they can't stop complaining about how clunky everything feels, such as committing new code.
Okay, if there is specific feedback on what parts feel clunky, I'd be happy to take that on. Yes, I mean, if there are gaps or paper cuts in the experience, absolutely want to fix those. I'll give you a quick example. Earlier this year, you were able to commit a draft only by right-click on every single draft. We introduced a new commit button on the drafts widget. Second thing, multi-select. You were forced to commit one at a time. Now we have batch commit that I showed you in the demos. We want to keep improving on that for sure.
Great. Chat seems happy. Louis K22 asks, one of the biggest advantages of using Git is being able to branch code and allow people to work on separate features independently and merge them into production when ready. How will Roblox support this workflow in the future?
Right. So I talked about the editing place and sandbox. That is exactly that scenario, being able to take either the entire place or parts of that and work in a sandbox and come back. I think as I mentioned during the conversation that the merging will become really important. We want to solve that right. So when you come back and we want to make that merge experience pretty simple.
Great. And lots of woos and hoorays in the chat. Blue Natural asks, in the future, will all group members with Team Create access be able to view newly created, wait, this is a duplicate, I swear.
Yeah, I think we just answered
We already answered this one. Is there a follow-up Below Natural or did we cover you already? Knight says, whoops. All right, we're good. We covered it. So Metacode is up with another question. Will collaboration still require Roblox users to be in the same group? This is a bit of an odd use case, but I often have to debug students' code. Right now, they have to send in their .rbxl files, and it would be nice to just have a way for students to invite me to edit their games.
Got it. Okay, I will follow up on that. I think that is an interesting case. So for now, our take is we want to have team create be useful, right? Like we want to have team create be the answer. When you enable team create, you can add your collaborators. So how they're setting up their group and exactly what your scenario is, I can follow up on Discord offline.
Great. And Dev Kirko wants to know, will it be possible to limit permission to see past versions of the game so certain contractors can only see the most actual version?
Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, the granular permissions, similar to the previous question, we acknowledge that there are scenarios where you want to have control on what level of access you give to anyone, whether it's restricting older versions or whether it's restricting to certain parts of the game. Those are scenarios we are considering. We have that on the roadmap to figure out.
Awesome. So that was the last question that I had here. We have a few more minutes, so if anyone has like one or two more follow-up questions or additional questions that came out of this, we can tackle probably 2 or 3 more questions. Otherwise, we can call it early and get on to the fun announcements of things. Got several people typing in chat. Oh, give it just another second. Should I turn Crab Rave back on? All right, here's the question. If it can be pasted over into my doc so I can read it. Night or breakfast? Here we go. So Zombody asks, are there plans to improve the testing workflow in Team Create, for example, by only loading the bare minimum you need to test the game? So no plugins, widgets, any of that.
Yes, we're looking at the testing workflows. Right now, we are coming up with a plan for how we improve the workflows. I'll give you one example. Even with the server and client testing, how is that workflow optimal? What are the tools that you need when you are testing? We'll definitely be reaching out and probably getting some data from folks as we move forward and formulate a plan.
Great. Oops. All right, 2 more questions now. They're flying in. Oh man, this is a mouthful. All right. Grill me 99. I got it. Is there going to be a way of running unit tests before a deploy?
Oh, that is an interesting one. We've talked about the notion of separating tests out from when you publish a game, unit tests running before you publish. That is an interesting one. I will definitely add that to our list because we are working through the testing scenario. So definitely add that to the list.
Great. And Below Natural has a follow-up for the permissions discussion. Will we be able to control the permissions of our Team Create collaborators?
More granular level, that is what I mentioned by granular permissions earlier. Yes, we want to look at that and figure out what the real need there is. As I mentioned, like some of you had mentioned the contractor scenario where you want to restrict the granular permissions. As we understand the scenarios, we can definitely figure out like what level of control we need to provide.
Great. Nova Klepta asks, any features coming up that will make it easier to publish a separate testing universe? Or any recommended practices?
Not in the immediate future, but that's definitely on our mind. As I mentioned, for testing, one of the key things, in addition to unit testing or validating your game, having environments for you to validate, right? Either a staging environment before you go to production or your development environment. So we are figuring out how to enable the environments. That is something we are actively discussing.
Awesome. Mr. Lonely says, you may have already answered this, but I was in a Zoom call, so I may have missed it. Sorry. Are there any plans to make Script Editor have live collaborative editing rather than the drafts we have now? I think that's a
yes.
Yes.
That I answered. We are considering it. Exactly how we do it is unclear, but it is on our roadmap.
Great. And Lord Dracius asks, earlier this year, I had a website bug where a former Team Create member was able to access my game completely. They could create game passes, change the title, even edit in Studio. Team Create was off when it happened, and the fix ended up being me unfriending and refriending him. Do you have any knowledge as to why this happened or if it's been fixed?
I'll have to look at that specific incident. But I'm not familiar with that particular incident. But especially when these incidents happen, we take it very seriously and jump all hands in and make sure that this kind of thing does not happen.
Yeah, we'll have to follow up on that one.
Yeah.
And Vertical asks, when I open Studio, all the plugin windows are open on the side, so I have to manually close them. Is this a feature or a bug? Does anyone else get this? I have a lot of plugins.
Yeah, so window management has come up before. That is another area that we are actively figuring out, like the plan. I think earlier in Rob's session as well, someone was asking around toolbar or ribbon customization. We kind of bucket that into one thing, like how do you customize and use Studio, right? We want to give you the tools that you use in the way you want to use them. So we want you to be able to customize it and arrange it in the way that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think Vertical, once we post the talks, I'd recommend giving Roberts a watch. There was some chats about plugins. Rings of Saturn asks, will there be an option to turn off automatic saving for Team Create?
I would like to understand why you would want to do that. Right now, the promise of Team Create is as I talked earlier, we save your data every 5 minutes to keep that data backed up in the cloud and give you a safe and reliable system. So I want to understand why you'd want to turn that off before I can answer that. But for now, no, there is no plans to allow that. But if there is a legitimate scenario behind that, I'd love to understand. So if you can ping me on Discord, I can take that offline.